was told. Two of her sons, Agatharsis and Galonus, were cast out by their mother and left the country, unable to fulfil the requirements set. But Scythes, the youngest, fulfilled them, and so stayed in the land. From Scythes, son of Heracles, come the whole line of kings of Scythia, and it is because of the vessel that the Scythians carry vessels on their belts to this day. This alone his mother did for Scythes. This is what the Greek dwellers in Pontus say. There is yet another story, to which account I myself especially incline. It is to this effect. The nomadic Scythians inhabiting Asia, when hard pressed in war by the Massagetae, fled across the Araxes river to the Cimmerian country, for the country which the Scythians now inhabit is said to have belonged to the Cimmerians before. And the Cimmerians, at the advance of the Scythians, deliberated as men threatened by a great force should. Opinions were divided. Both were strongly held, but that the princess was the more honourable. For the people believed that their part was to withdraw, and that there was no need to risk their lives for the dust of the earth. But the princes were for fighting to defend their country against the attackers. Neither side could persuade the other, neither the people the princes, nor the princes the people. The one party planned to depart without fighting and leave the country to their enemies, but the princes were determined to lie dead in their own country, and not to flee with the people, for they considered how happy their situation had been, and what ills were likely to come upon them if they fled from their native land. Having made up their minds, the princes separated into two equal bands, and fought with each other until they were all killed by each other's hands. Then the Cimmerian people buried them by the Tiras river, where their tombs are still to be seen, and having buried them, left the land. And the Scythians came and took possession of the country left empty. And to this day there are Cimmerian walls in Scythia, and a Cimmerian ferry, and there is a country Cimmeria, and a strait named Cimmerian. Furthermore, it is evident that the Cimmerians, in their flight from the Scythians into Asia, also made a colony on the peninsula, where the Greek city of Sinope has been founded. And it is clear that the Scythians pursued them, and invaded Media, missing their way. For the Cimmerians always fled along the coast, and the Scythians pursued with the Caucasus on their right until they came into the Median land, turning inland on their way. That is the other story current among Greeks and foreigners alike. There is also a story related in a poem by Aristes, son of Caustrovius, a man of Proconnesus. This Aristes, possessed by Phoebes, visited the Isidones. Beyond these, he said, live the one-eyed Arimaspians, beyond whom are the griffins that guard gold, and beyond these again are the Hyperboreans, whose territory reaches to the sea. Except for the Hyperboreans, all these nations, and first the Arimaspians, are always at war with their neighbours. The Isidones were pushed from their lands by the Arimaspians, and the Scythians by the Isidones, and the Cimmerians, living by the southern sea, were hard pressed by the Scythians, and left their country. Thus Aristes' story does not agree with the Scythian account about this country. Where Aristes wrote this came from, I have already said. I will tell the story that I heard about him at Proconnesus and Cyzicus. It is said that this Aristes, who was as well born as any of his townfolk, went into a fuller's shop at Proconnesus, and there died. The owner shut his shop, and went away to tell the dead man's relatives, and the report of Aristes' death being spread about in the city was disputed by a man of Cyzicus, who had come from the town of Artace, and said that he had met Aristes going towards Cyzicus, and spoken with him. While he argued vehemently, the relatives of the dead man came to the fuller's shop with all that was necessary for burial. But when the place was opened, there was no Aristes there, dead or alive. But in the 7th year after that, Aristes appeared at Proconnesus, and made that poem which the Greeks now call the Arimaspeia, after which he vanished once again. Such is the tale told in these two towns. But this, I know, happened to the Metapontines in Italy, 240 years after the second disappearance of Aristes, as reckoning made at Proconnesus and Metapontum shows me. Aristes, so the Metapontines say, appeared in their country and told them to set up an altar to Apollo, and set beside it a statue bearing the name of Aristes the Proconnessian. For, he said, Apollo had come to their country alone of all Italian lands, and he, the man who was now Aristes, but then when he followed the god had been a crow, had come with him. After saying this, he vanished. The Metapontines, so they say, sent to Delphi and asked the god what the vision of the man could mean, and the Pythian priestess told them to obey the vision, saying that their fortune would be better. They did as instructed, and now there stands beside the image of Apollo a statue bearing the name of Aristes. A grove of bay trees surrounds it. The image is set in the market-place. Let it suffice that I have said this much about Aristes. As for the land of which my story has begun to speak, no one exactly knows what lies north of it, for I can find out from no one who claims to know as an eye-witness. For even Aristes, whom I recently mentioned, even he did not claim to have gone beyond the Isidonies, even though a poet. But he spoke by hearsay of what lay north, saying that the Isidonians had told him. But all that we have been able to learn, for certain, by report of the farthest lands, shall be told. North of the port of the Borysthenes, which lies midway along the coast of Scythia, the first inhabitants are the Callipidae, who are Scythian Greeks, and beyond them another tribe called Elazones. These and the Seleucidae, though in other ways they live like the Scythians, plant and eat grain, onions, garlic, lentils, and millet. Above the Elazones live Scythian farmers, who plant grain not to eat, but to sell. North of these the Neuri. North of the Neuri the land is uninhabited, so far as we know. These are the tribes that the Hypanis river, west of the Borysthenes. But on the other side of the Borysthenes, the tribe nearest to the sea is the tribe of the woodlands, and north of these live Scythian farmers, whom the Greek colonists on the Hypanis river, who call themselves Obiopolitae, call Borystheneaetae. These farming Scythians inhabit a land stretching east a 3 days' journey to a river called Pantecapes, and north as far as an 11 days' voyage up the Borysthenes. And north of these the land is desolate for a long way. After the desolation is the country of the man-eaters, who are a nation apart and by no means Scythian, and beyond them is true desolation, where no nation of men lives, as far as we know. But to the east of these farming Scythians, across the Pantecapes river, you are in the land of nomadic Scythians, who plant nothing nor plough, and all these lands except the woodlands are bare of trees. These nomads inhabit a country to the east that stretches 14 days' journey to the Garus river. Across the Garus are those lands called royal, where the best and most numerous of the Scythians are, who consider all other Scythians their slaves. Their territory stretches south to the Tauric land, and east to the trench that was dug by the sons of the blind men, and to the port called the Cliffs on the Mysian lake, and part of it stretches to the Tanais river. North of the royal Scythians live the Blackcloaks, who are of another and not a Scythian stock. And beyond the Blackcloaks the land is all marshes and uninhabited by man, as far as we know. Across the Tanais it is no longer Scythia. The first of the districts belongs to the Sauromaetae, whose country begins at the inner end of the Mysian lake and stretches 15 days' journey north, and is quite bare of both wild and cultivated trees. Above these, in the second district, the Bedini inhabit a country thickly overgrown with trees of all kinds. North of the Bedini the land is uninhabited for 7 days' journey. After this desolation, and somewhat more toward the east wind, live the Tisagaetae, a numerous and separate